Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today we are going to talk about some hidden gems in your analytics that you may not even know about that's going to help you increase your business. I want to welcome Philippa Games to the show. She is works with small to medium-sized companies, and they hire Philippa to find actionable insights in their digital analytics and to make recommendations that will grow their business and reduce wasted spending. Because many of those hidden gems because many of us are missing those hidden gems. We're throwing money out the window that we don't need to. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. She has over 20 years experience in translating the metrics into creative ideas to move the business forward, and then creating effective data-driven digital strategies designed to achieve goals and maximize return on investment. And most importantly, all in understandable English that any of us can take action on. Welcome to the show, Philippa.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's great to be with you.
So, I guess one of the obvious questions to start is that first of all, are we really understanding our analytics?
So I guess that depends. you know, it, the classic consultant answer is it depends, right? That's what we all say because that's there often isn't a one size fits all answer. But the key to analytics. So for a lot of people, they log into. So we're talking about like Google Analytics or something equivalent. For your website, and you log into it, and there's just massive amounts of numbers and charts and graphs and whatever, and it's incredibly overwhelming. And it's completely understandable that a lot of people kind of either just shut it down immediately or say, did I get more something something very basic, like did I get more visitors than I did last week, right? And if the answer to that is yes, they go, great, it's working, and they go off to do something more interesting. And as I said, you can't blame them because it's not necessarily easy or intuitive to get in if you haven't got a way in. So the point is that in order to get actionable insights, you've really got to have a very clear handle on what you're trying to do. That's really the point. And not just for the website overall, but I like to say for every single page. So as a visitor, wherever I am on your site, I should know, or it should be clear to me what you want me to do next.
Yes.
Even if I don't want to do it, but I mean, that's a different issue. But, you have to actually drive people to action because
Yes.
in my experience, it's just bizarre. But if you don't tell them what to do next, if they want to stay and do more, they'll try to figure it out or not, but they'll do what they want to do. And that may often be not what you wanted. So the key is to be able to say, this is what I expect to be happening here. Is it happening? Yes, no. And if yes, I mean, is there a way to do more of it? And if no, why not? And what do we need to do differently? And that's the way in, and that's how you can start, because then you know what questions to ask, right? So that's how you can start to make it more meaningful.
So would you say generally that, I mean, obviously, it depends because it depends on the person and the company, but let's just talk generally because, most of us are like consultants, professionals. We're running most of the business. We're wearing most of the hats. Um, would it be correct, not correct, but would it be the average to say that most of us barely even check our analytics, let alone understand them?
I don't know. I think because obviously a lot of the people that I talk to are either checking them and want to know more or realize that they would like to check them. So, of course, I don't personally necessarily hear from the people who don't care. And to be very fair, there are people who say, look, I've got masses of business. I'm doing incredibly well. My website is there because, you kind of have to have a website, but I really don't care because I don't need it. And, I've had business owners, I mean, in other businesses like e-commerce or something like that, if a business owner says my website's doing fine, you can push back and you can say, look, you know, even so, would you rather have more business than you have now? Because very few people are going to say no to that. But in the consulting business, you know, some of us have only a certain amount of carrying capacity. And so perhaps it's more legitimate to say, yes, I've got all the business I can handle and I really don't need to know anymore. That's kind of the only kind of answer that I think is legitimate, but you know.
Mhm. So, Philippa, I would love to hear more about, how did you get into, marketing and understanding analytics? Obviously, you have many years experience in it. With 20 years experience, you were not far into the internet age before when you started.
Yeah, that's true. I hate to say it, I was around at the beginning. Which, you know, is interesting because that means that you've got this track record of being there and seeing what's essentially worked since the beginning
Yep.
and what was a fad that, you know, everybody was all excited about and then it went away. So for example, email, right? Email was actually invented in the 1970s. And you know, I remember, I think it was in about 2008, 2009, there was a cover of Wired magazine that said email is dead. And people have been saying email is dead for many, I mean, just about all the time now. And it isn't. And if you look
True.
at surveys of marketing directors about the most effective marketing channels that they have, email is always right up at the top. Because
Yes.
you can customize it, personalize it, you know, because now with all the privacy regulations, if somebody's
Yes.
given you their email address, you have permission to contact them. So that's absolute gold, right? Um, so just as an example of a trend that has just, and it's so basic. I think that's the other thing. It's easy, right? You just use it. It's like a huge learning curve. You don't have to do, you can do design, but you don't have to do amazing designs, you know. So I think I was always just fascinated by the possibilities of what you can do online and, you know, all these really interesting ideas that come out. And like I say, the ones that work, ones that don't work. So I think that's why I'm very interested. And I think this is why I'm trying to approach shows like yours, because what interests me, I mean, we talked at the beginning about how overwhelming the analytics can look if you're just looking at it. And, you know, especially with Google Analytics 4, which is what I mostly work with, which has come out recently in the past year or so, you know, it is not easy and it's not intuitive, and it's extremely powerful and extremely useful if you set it up right. But if you don't set it up right, you know, it's a mess. And out of the box, it's not particularly useful without customizing it to your own needs. And it's a lot to ask of business owners and my clients. You know, I don't think I've ever had a business owner come to me and say, Philippa, I want to hire you to give me 50 pages of analytics reports a month, right? That's not what they're asking for. What they're asking for is tell me what I need to know to run my business better.
Yeah.
And if you don't ever show me a page of analytics in that process, that's fine. Just tell me how you got to where to the recommendations that you're making or the insights that you're sharing. And let's talk about what to do about it. Right. So what I'm interested in, and the reason that I think I'm wanting to continue in this business, is that I want to help business owners. There's a lot online that's very technical. I mean, there's a lot of information, but it's a lot about the interface and all of that. And what I'm trying to do is to inspire business owners to use it, but from a business perspective. I've found countless opportunities when working with business sites for new products, new services, new target audiences that showed up from sort of looking at the analytics and getting an inspiration, getting a creative idea. That's data driven, but it's then a creative idea that the business can use. And that's what I'm interested in. So that's why I like, you know, I can sort of say the internet in English because I'm a Brit, and that's like but also literally talking to business owners in business terms, not analytics jargonese, about what you can really do with this.
you just touched on quite a few points, and I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest ones is, as business owners, we're not looking for 50 pages of analytics. We're looking for someone to analyze it and say, "Okay, here's where you're doing good. See these numbers? Here's where you're doing good.
Right.
Here's where you're not doing so good. Take a look at these numbers." And then how do we fix that? And so I think that's crucial. We're going to take a quick ad break, everybody. I would love for you to check out the Create and Scale checklist if you are thinking about writing a book to build your business and want to know if you're heading in the right direction. This checklist will help you out. Welcome back. Philippa, you didn't really talk about, some of the jobs and things that you've had. Like, so, when you got into this, was this just a hobby or were you working in the industry?
Yeah, I was working in the industry. I actually, when I first started on the internet, I was working for a nonprofit. So I came to the US, and I was working for a nonprofit. I was actually living in Chicago at the time. Now I'm in California, which is warmer. But I was working for a nonprofit that was actually a national nonprofit that had chapters based in every state. And they said there was quite a visionary communications director there who said, we really ought to be communicating via email. We ought to have bulletin boards, community, that kind of stuff, so that we can all talk together, because it was early days and people hadn't really adopted it at that point. And I was actually hired as essentially an evangelist, to persuade them. I mean, I had no knowledge whatsoever of the subject matter of the nonprofit, but that wasn't the point. I was hired to get them all communicating together using electronic means, and then also from there, obviously, to move that into communicating with their own constituents and so on. And it was very interesting because it was early days. There were people who were, it's typical, right? There are your crazy early adopters who love the whole thing and they can't wait to do more and more. And then there were the over my dead body people. And there was, and it's funny now. I mean, we look back and it's like, wait, there were people who said over my dead body about using, building community online. But there were, well, I like picking up the phone and I like sending faxes and,
But the internet's not staying.
Yeah, right. So that was kind of how I got into it, and then I just got the bug, and as it developed, I find it very, very interesting because it's like the intersection. I mean, one of the things that I talk about, I also do some speaking and coaching and so on, and one of the things I talk about is how to create effective emotional connections with your visitors, because that's how we all sell, right? If we don't have an emotional connection, which A means we like the person we want to do business with, and B, we trust them. We think they produce what we think they're going to say. They do what they're going to say they're going to do. They're ethical. They're authentic, right? How do you do that in an online environment? And I think that's a very interesting question that I like to talk about. So that's kind of where I find the interest and the inspiration.
It's funny. I remember the first time I heard the word email. A friend of mine, I was at his place, and I mean, I'd been around computers since the 70s. My dad was in computers right at the very beginning. I actually had a computer in my house in the 70s.
Wow.
So, computers were not new to me at that point. But, my friend was talking to me about, sending letters over the internet. And I mean, at this point, you could barely get a website to load. Like,
Right.
you had the dial-up phone. You had to put the phone on the thing, and the website would just kind of load
right.
one
Okay,
line.
we're dating ourselves now,
Yeah. But my friend talk to me, and I'm like, really? Like, that's incredible. And he's like, he's like, "You want to come over and see it?" So yes, I went over to his place and he showed me this email. He was emailing somebody. I can't remember where it was, but like we were in sort of Toronto, Ontario, and he was mailing somebody in another country, and I'm like, that is amazing. Like I was sort of immediately hooked. Now, I don't think I kind of got an email address till later on because we moved to a very rural area, so we barely had internet to begin with. But definitely once I could, I was like, oh, I like this email. Now I get thousands a day. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, one more email.
But I actually, to that point, remember a story that proved to me very early on about the power of it. So somebody I knew, unfortunately, had a baby who was born with a very, very rare brain condition. And the doctors, I was living in Chicago at the time, really didn't know much about the condition. And I was online. I'm an information scientist by training, so I was researching and I came across a forum where there was a Japanese doctor who actually was an expert in this condition, and I was able to put them together. And without the internet, that would have been even back then in the early days. That was something that you couldn't have done before.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that's when you start going, boy, this is powerful, when it's used for good. Now, these days, we also know that unfortunately, there are some very dark sides of the internet and
Mm.
social media, which is very concerning. But yeah.
So let's switch to some of those hidden gems. So I know you've got a
Yes.
few that you want to tell us about today. So I'm going to let you use loose to talk about those, and then I'll ask you a few questions.
So the folks we're talking to today are consultants, coaches, authors, right? So people who sell expertise, right?
Yes.
So in order to sell expertise, a lot of the time, you have to demonstrate your expertise on your website. So you have to have some content. And if you have a lot of content, one of the things that you really should have, is a search engine that's actually on your own site. So this is for people to find stuff on your site once they've arrived at your site. And then you can link up that search engine to analytics. So now you can tell what search terms people are putting into your search engine, which is telling
Mm.
you what people who come to your site are looking for from you. That is a gold mine, because it tells you what words, what language do they use to describe what they expect to find from you. And that can sometimes be different from the words that you use, especially in industries where there's a load of jargon or, kind of insider terminology that the general public might not know. So, and if you find that, they're using sort of very lay terms for something that you've got a business term for example, you've got to promote those lay terms. You've got to go out and do SEO and have content using those terms in order to attract those people who don't yet know your language. Secondly, it can tell you what people are looking for that perhaps you don't have yet, but they clearly
Mm.
expect you to provide. And you can look at that and say, is there anything here that, well, here's an idea, that we could provide. So it's market research for new products and services. Now, I work with B2B clients and we've created new products around that. But in the information space, well, here's one of my favorite stories. So I worked with a lawyer. So she was an employment lawyer, but she didn't do litigation. What she did was training for large Silicon Valley companies in how to prevent employee lawsuits.
Mm.
So, how to get ahead in terms of like protecting against sexual harassment suits and that kind of stuff. And she had a ton of content on her site about all this stuff. And we looked at the internal search results and we realized that a lot of people coming to her site were not the corporate people that were going to hire her, but employees saying, I think I'm being sexually harassed. What can I do? Or I think I should be getting overtime and I'm not. What can I do? right? Or I think I've been unfairly terminated. What can I do? And so these individuals were never going to hire her main business. That's not what she
No.
did. But what we did was to create a load of ebooks at kind of impulse buy price points. So I think the one about am I being sexually harassed was about $15, $20, something like that. And the selling of it, I mean, obviously she's practicing in California, and so it had all sorts of legal disclaimers on it. You know, this is not legal information, but a lot of what people think is sexual harassment isn't. And so before you hire an expensive lawyer, you know, get this inexpensive ebook and see if you might have the makings of a case. And we created a load of those, and we also created some guides for businesses and so on and so forth. And of course, the beauty of an ebook, which is this is applicable hopefully to a lot of people in your audience, like for their own expertise. The beauty of ebooks is and you can charge for them if you do a lot of research, and you know, you don't have, they can be more than $20 if there's more value. But it's self-fulfilling. Once you get it up and running, you know, it just runs. And they made, you know, several $1,000s on the side every month for this business. So without any further input from the business, right?
Yeah.
So you know, for people who produce information, I still think that information products are really worthwhile. And as I say, your that search engine was what triggered it, because we realized, and we wouldn't have known without the information about what people were looking for. And you can't tell that if you don't look at the analytics. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
So let me just ask you sort of a techie question, because I'm that kind of way. How would you connect a search engine? Let's say you have a WordPress site. Is there like a plugin, or how does that work? Or is it something you have to have something custom designed? Is it expensive?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of plugins, and then the analytics can pick those up, and you just sort of you tell it what your, I don't want to get too techie, but there's a search string. So if you look at, when you do a search on a website, if you look at the URL of what you get back, there's a question mark, and then there's something, and then there's kind of your search terms. And that's what it works on. So that question mark then tells it the next thing is a search term, and that's what shows up in the analytics. And from there, it will tell you whether or not people found something and went to another page. You know, it will also tell you about search terms that they put in that they can't find anything. And by the way, that's another really interesting area. When somebody puts in a search term on a website and they get, sorry, nothing, the typical response is no results found, please try again. Like it's your fault. You did something wrong, right? Why is it your fault? You're the one telling them what you need. And again, I always feel like there's a better way to handle that, because you can design the search results page. So, you know, I'm sorry we didn't find that. For example, here's an email link. Send us your question, right?
Yes.
So just so that you're not effectively slamming the door in their face and making it their problem, which is really not good customer service. Right?
True. Philippa, we're going to switch over here to your book. Now, you told me that you've written this a while ago, but it's still pretty there. So first of all, tell us the name of the book and give us a quick synopsis of what it's about.
My book was actually one in a series. So the series was called 42 Rules. I don't know if you remember The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but there are 42 rules, right? The magic number is 42. So there was a whole series of these books, and mine was called 42 Rules for a Website That Wins. My domain is websitesthatwin.com. And so it's basically about strategy, analytics, creating emotional connections, you know, and it's actually very easy to read, because each rule is a page facing each other, right? So you can just dip into it. It's not a sequential rule, read page 1 through X, you know, and it's not very long because it's only 42 rules. It was actually quite hard to write because of that format that's absolutely set. You've got to encapsulate every rule. You know, you've got to say, what am I talking about? how does it work? Here's an example,
Oh,
right? And then sort of tie it all together in essentially a facing page is about 600 words. And it's actually
yeah.
often a lot easier. I'm sure people will resonate with this. It's a lot easier to write a lot more words than to get all that done in a really concise but effective way in 600 words.
Oh, it's funny. As a writer, now I'm not a website writer per se, but some of my clients have sometimes said, Kim, can you help us fix up the wording on our website? Right. And so I'll take a look at it and, I have some suggestions, at least some things. Short form writing drives me nuts. I am a long form writer. Like, don't give me 100 words, man. That's like torture. Like I want thousands of words, and I've come to realize that. So I don't do website content very often because it's just I
Yeah,
don't like it. It's not my thing at all.
right.
So Philippa, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every author that comes on the show. So are you ready?
Yeah.
What was the good, the bad, and the ugly about writing, editing, and publishing that book?
I was very lucky. I mean, I got invited to contribute to the series, and it's print on demand, and which is great because for me, in digital marketing, I mean, everything changes every day. You never know what's around the corner, and so to go through a traditional publishing process where it takes a year after you've written it for it to come out, it's just not. It's not feasible.
It
It's
wasn't
just
going to work.
stupid. So the print on demand was fantastic. And the other thing that was absolutely fantastic, I still am blown away by this. I got some amazing endorsements for this book. My book was endorsed by Guy Kawasaki, which I'm incredibly proud of, and also endorsed
Nice.
by a guy called Vince Cerf, who I don't know if you've heard of Vince Cerf, CERF. He's actually one of the official fathers of the internet. He was the guy who
Oh,
invented TCP/IP, which is the protocol that gives us IP addresses. So he can literally say that he's behind the technology internet. And I met him when he was speaking at a conference and or a meeting, and he's such a gentleman. And when it came to get endorsements, I can't believe that I actually have a motivational story because I'm a digital marketing speaker, but I thought, who in my wildest dreams would I like to endorse my book? And those were the top two names that I came up. And I'm talking about wildest dreams, right? Those are big names. And I thought, that must be, well, who am I kidding? Like, then, it's never going to happen. But I had also met Guy Kawasaki at some speakers meetings, that he used, and we'd had some conversation. And so I just thought, if you don't try, for sure you won't get them. And so I contacted them, and Guy Kawasaki told me afterwards that he was actually about to go on holiday, and he decided for some reason that he'd take a quick look at my book on the beach. So I got really lucky because I believe he gets asked for at least 80 endorsements a month, and he's obviously not going to do that many of them. So I have to say to everybody, I think I love being able to say that. Do that. I mean, you think about who in my wildest dreams would I like to get to endorse my book, and try it, because you never know.
yeah.
And I got some other great endorsements too. And then, I think that the struggle of it was what we just talked about, was the constraints of the format. But on the other hand, it was very challenging, but it was a good challenge, to be able to get to write really, really concisely and still get your point across.
Love it. Love it. Philippa, we are pretty well out of time. You have about a minute to share a final thought. And then for those who have enjoyed this conversation, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. So, analytics can tell you a lot. And like I say, they can give you lots of business ideas. And I'd be more than happy to connect with anybody who'd like to chat with me. I do have a complimentary 30-minute consult if you'd like to sort of kick some stuff around. And I do have on my website a free ebook, which gives you 5 hidden gems of the kind that I've just talked about, but different ones from my actual consulting experience, so that you can read them. And it's not analytics jargon. There's no charts or graphs in the whole thing, but it's ideas of business things that we've done, and to see if people can get inspired and maybe say, hey, maybe that's happening on my site. And so if you'd like to come and pick up that book, that's absolutely free, and you're welcome to do that. So my website is websitesthatwin.com. And Kim, I'm sure that you'll put that in the show notes, right? And
Yes.
and I'm also happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. And Kim, I'd like to turn it on you and just say, okay, what one thing did we talk about that really struck you?
The search engine, and how you can actually see what people are searching for on your website, so that you can provide it for them. That was really valuable. Now, audience, you know what time it is it's that time again. The show is over. Philippa, thank you so much for being on the show today. Appreciate you having it on. Audience, if you're looking for where to go to next, I recommend episode 417, writing website content that converts. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know that my daughter puts the thumbnail somewhere here on the screen for you to click on. If you're on your favorite podcast app, you're going to be scanning back about 20 episodes. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.